Alien captains prefer human repair bays. Here's why. HFY Sci-fi Story on the farthest edge of the galaxy. In the cold emptiness where stars were just a distant flicker, there was a space station known only to the most desperate travelers and hidden forces in the universe. The station, Salvage Dock 57, had long been forgotten by most, but not by the human mechanics that ran it. Despite its shabby exterior and outdated systems, the crew here had a reputation for getting things done, no matter how impossible the task. And today, that reputation would be put to the test. Jackson Reeve wiped his hands on the grease-stained overalls as he stared at the holographic readout on the control panel. The display flickered, the light casting long shadows across his tired face. The ship he was supposed to be working on, just another rusted hulk from the outer rim, was now a mere shell, a reminder of the ever-growing list of tasks the crew had to finish. It was supposed to be a simple day of repairs. The station's crew, a ragtag group of humans who had become skilled mechanics over the years, was used to fixing old ships and salvaging what they could from wrecks. But then the message came through the communication system. "Docking request," the message began. "Captain Reichs of the Exari Starfleet, requesting repair assistance. Urgent." Jackson's hand paused over the controls. The Exari Starfleet was a well-known fleet, and Captain Reichs, their leader, was a legend among the stars. Fierce, strategic, and, from what the rumors said, not at all inclined to trust humans. The reputation of the Exari species was built on their advanced technology and their distance from the rest of the galaxy. Humans were often considered beneath them, their tech considered primitive by alien standards. Exari? Jackson muttered under his breath. The crew had heard whispers, but no one ever thought they'd see one of them here. Not on Salvage Dock 57, at least. As the station's docking bay doors groaned open, Jackson gathered his crew together. There was Mia, the young prodigy with a talent for coding. Gavin, the grizzled veteran who had seen more space battles than any human should, and Kara, the mechanical genius who could make anything run with just a wrench and a few spare parts. They were all good at what they did, but no one was quite sure how they'd handle this new challenge. "All right," Jackson said, looking at his team. "This isn't just any ship. Captain Reichs will be on board, and we need to prove to him that we can handle anything." Mia raised an eyebrow. "You mean that alien captain who thinks we're a bunch of amateurs?" "That's the one," Jackson confirmed. "But we've got one thing he doesn't: human ingenuity. He might not like us, but he won't deny we get the job done." He slapped his hand on the console, making the station's lights flicker. "So, let's get to work." The Exari ship that appeared before them was unlike anything Jackson had seen before. It was sleek, almost alien in its design, with shifting colors that made the hull look like it was alive. Its surface shimmered with strange metallic patterns, and the ship seemed to hum in the vacuum of space, a sound only detectable to the keenest of ears. The ship was a masterpiece of alien engineering, built for speed, combat, and exploration. It was clear it had been in battle. The scars from previous conflicts marred its surface. But one thing was certain: it wasn't here for a simple tune-up. As the ship docked, the massive doors of the station opened wide, and a long gangway extended out to meet it. There was no turning back now. Jackson led his team to the docking bay, where they were greeted by a figure that seemed to almost glow in the dim light of the station. The alien Captain Reichs stood tall and imposing, his eyes sharp and calculating. His skin, a deep shade of violet, was adorned with intricate patterns that pulsed with an eerie light. His alien features were both mesmerizing and intimidating, but it was his expression that captured Jackson's attention, cold, distant, and full of suspicion. Reichs didn't speak immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, surveying the human crew with a look that seemed to dismiss them before he even said a word. His eyes finally settled on Jackson, who stood straight, trying his best to appear calm under the alien's intense gaze. "I did not request you." Reichs's voice was deep, like a rumble of thunder, but with a sharpness that made every word cut through the air. "I requested a proper repair facility. You are humans." Jackson didn't flinch. "And humans are known for getting things done, no matter how complicated. We'll fix your ship, Captain. You'll be back in the stars before you know it." Reichs's lips curled into a smirk, but there was no humor in it. "We will see, human. My ship is not like others. The technology you work with, primitive by our standards, may not be enough." "We'll see about that," Jackson said firmly. "Why don't you show us what's wrong?" Reichs led the crew aboard his ship, which, despite its exterior beauty, seemed to hide a labyrinth of complex systems and advanced technology that Jackson had never seen before. The crew got to work immediately, tearing into the ship's guts to assess the damage. Hours passed as the team worked, their hands covered in grease and sweat. They discovered a problem with the ship's energy core, a flaw in its containment system that had caused the shields to fluctuate. It was dangerous, something no alien mechanic would have missed if they'd been paying attention. But of course, Rix wouldn't admit that so easily. He watched, silently, from the background, offering no help. Jackson wasn't surprised by the alien captain's behavior. Rix thought they were just a bunch of small-time mechanics. But Jackson had worked in worse conditions, and he had a feeling that by the time the repair was done, Rix's opinion of humanity would change. As the hours stretched into the late hours of the station cycle, Jackson's team worked with skill and precision. They replaced the damaged parts, recalibrated the systems, and even improved upon the ship's design with human ingenuity. But still, Rix said nothing, as if he was waiting for them to fail, but there was no failure in sight. The ship was almost ready to go. Jackson felt a sense of pride swelling within him. The Iksari Starfleet might think they were superior, but Jackson knew better. Humanity might be young in the grand scale of the galaxy, but they had something that no other species had, the ability to adapt and overcome. And Jackson would prove that to Rix, one repair at a time. The hours passed and Salvage Dock 57 hummed with life as Jackson and his crew continued their work on the alien vessel. Every tool was in use, every part carefully replaced, but something about Captain Reich's cold, unwavering gaze made the whole process feel like it was being done under a microscope. The alien captain had yet to speak more than a few words, but his silence was loud, filled with doubt and superiority. He seemed to think the crew of human mechanics were nothing more than amateurs. Jackson kept his focus, ignoring Rix's quiet observations. The mission was simple: get the ship fixed and get it back to its fleet. It didn't matter if Rix didn't think they could do it. Jackson knew better. The human crew had proven themselves time and time again, and this would be no different. Still, as Jackson worked, his mind wandered. The Iksari Starfleet was known for its immense power and technology, capable of overwhelming most adversaries in the galaxy. The ships were sleek, fast, and deadly. But in all their strength, they lacked one thing: ingenuity. Almost done with the core recalibration, Mia called from the engine room, her voice tinged with excitement. Good, Jackson replied, wiping his hands on his rag. We need to get those shields back to full strength. He glanced at Captain Rix, who stood near the back of the bay, watching them. The alien's hands were clasped behind his back, and his eyes remained sharp, as if looking for something to criticize. Jackson couldn't quite place why, but there was a feeling in the air, something heavy. He knew Reichs didn't believe in the power of human repairs, but there was a deeper edge to his silence. It was almost as if the alien captain didn't want to admit that the humans were more than capable. The more Jackson thought about it, the more he realized how much they had to prove. They weren't just fixing a ship. They were proving that humanity had a place in the galaxy, that they were more than just survivors on the fringe. They were a force to be reckoned with. The sound of clanging metal echoed through the station as Kara tightened a bolt on the outer hull. The ship was nearly done, but it wasn't just about the repairs. Jackson knew that whatever happened next, it would change things. They had to impress Rix. They had to show him that humans weren't inferior, that their hard work and adaptability were more powerful than any fleet of alien ships. But it wasn't just the crew of Salvage Dock 57 that Jackson needed to worry about. The galaxy was filled with powerful beings, and if the crew couldn't prove themselves to Captain Reichs, they might lose the opportunity to work with other alien fleets. The future of their station, and perhaps humanity's reputation, hinged on this very moment. Mia, Jackson said, walking over to the engine room. How's the core? Mia looked up from the complicated array of wires and monitors. It's stable for now, but the real test is when we fire it up. The energy flow will determine if the recalibration works. Understood, Jackson replied. He nodded to Gavin, who was keeping an eye on the rest of the crew. Let's make sure the rest of the ship checks out. We need to be ready. As Jackson turned to leave, a soft, clipped voice interrupted him. You still believe this will work? He stopped, his back stiffening. Captain Reichs had moved closer, standing in the doorway of the engine room. The alien's violet eyes glinted under the harsh station lights, and his arms were crossed over his chest. Jackson met his gaze. Of course. You'd be surprised at what humans can do when they put their minds to it. Reichs's lips twitched, as if he wanted to say something, but held it back. I don't see how your kind can possibly understand our technology. Our ships are built for combat, for survival, not for the haphazard way you work. You'd be surprised, Jackson repeated, a confident smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Humans may not have your advanced systems, but we know how to make things work when it counts. Rick studied him for a moment longer before stepping aside to allow Jackson to pass. The captain's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps doubt, that Jackson couldn't ignore. "Very well, human. I will see if your confidence is well placed," Rick said with a nod. Jackson didn't let the alien's words shake him. It was clear that Rick was testing them, pushing them to see if they could rise to the challenge, and Jackson was determined to show him that they could. By the time they were ready to fire up the energy core, the whole station seemed to hold its breath. The human crew had worked tirelessly to restore the ship to a functional state. The recalibration was complete, the shield systems were operational, and the engine was purring like a well-oiled machine. It was time for the ultimate test. Mia took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the controls. The pressure of the moment wasn't lost on her. She knew the stakes, activating the core in 3, 2, 1. The hum of the core filled the room as it came to life, sending waves of energy through the ship's system. Jackson watched the readouts closely, his heart pounding in his chest. If anything went wrong, it could all fall apart in an instant. For a few tense seconds, the station was quiet. Then the ship's lights flickered, and the shields powered up, glowing a brilliant blue as they enveloped the vessel. Mia exhaled in relief. "It's working." "We did it." Jackson's eyes met Reich's across the room. The alien captain was standing at the control panel, watching the process with sharp, calculating eyes. He didn't speak immediately, but Jackson could see the change. The skepticism in Rick's gaze was beginning to fade, replaced by something else. Respect, maybe. "Human ingenuity," Rick finally said, his voice low but not dismissive. "Perhaps I was wrong." Jackson allowed himself a small smile. He didn't need Rick's approval, but hearing the words meant more than he'd expected. For the first time, he felt like the reputation of humanity was shifting. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about showing the galaxy that humans had something no one else could match, a drive to adapt, overcome, and thrive. And as Rick's turned to leave, Jackson knew that they had just made their mark. The future of Salvage Dock 57, and humanity, had just become a whole lot brighter. The quiet hum of Salvage Dock 57 echoed through the station as the human crew gathered their tools and wiped the sweat from their brows. The job was nearly done. The Ixari Starfleet ship was no longer just a broken, damaged hulk. It was ready to go back into space, its systems humming with life, its shields stronger than before. Jackson Reeves stood by the control panel, watching the final tests run. He felt a sense of pride well up inside him, but it was quickly replaced by something else, unease. Captain Reichs had barely spoken a word since the shields powered up, his cold expression still lingering as he observed the human crew's work. But Jackson could see a flicker of something different in the alien's gaze now. Respect, perhaps. "We did it," Mia said quietly as she stood next to Jackson, her fingers running over the last few monitors. The core recalibration worked perfectly. Gavin, always the pessimist, spoke up from the far side of the bay. "Yeah, but don't get too comfortable. There's no telling what might happen once that ship leaves here. We could be in for a surprise." Jackson nodded, but kept his focus on the task at hand. "We'll handle it. Let's make sure everything is tight." Before Jackson could continue, a loud, jarring alarm sounded across the station. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in a crimson glow. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the hall, shaking the station violently. "What the hell?" Gavin shouted, his eyes wide. Jackson spun around, his pulse quickening. "What's happening?" "Enemy ship inbound," came a crackling voice over the comms. It was Mia at the control station. "They're firing on us. Shields are failing. Damn it." Jackson cursed under his breath. "The station's not equipped for this kind of battle. We need to act fast." Mia's hands flew over the control panel. "I'm rerouting power to the shields. It's not much, but it might hold off the worst of the attack." "I'll take the gunner's seat," Gavin volunteered, rushing to the weapon systems. Rax's voice cut through the chaos. "What's happening, human?" Jackson turned to face the alien captain, whose calm demeanor hadn't faltered even as explosions rocked the station. "We're under attack. Someone's targeting us. Your ship is still docked, and we need to protect it. Are you in?" Rex's eyes narrowed as if calculating the situation. His posture was still stiff, but there was a hint of a decision forming. "My ship can defend itself," he said, his voice cool. "But the station," he hesitated for a moment. "Fine. I'll help you, but you're on your own if things go wrong." Jackson nodded. "Just keep your ship ready to move. We'll handle the station." With that, the crew sprang into action. Jackson and Mia moved to the station's control center to monitor incoming fire while Gavin began coordinating the station's limited defenses. Kara rushed to reinforce the outer hull, checking for any weaknesses that could make the station vulnerable. The explosions grew louder as the enemy ship drew closer. It wasn't just any ship. It was a massive warship, a sleek vessel with sharp, deadly edges. Its weapon systems were powerful, more than capable of piercing the station's fragile defenses. "We need more time," Jackson said, his mind racing. "We need to power up the external defenses or we're done for." Mia didn't look away from the console as she worked. "I'm doing everything I can. The power reroutes are taking too long. If they hit us again, we'll lose the station entirely." The station groaned as another round of explosions rattled the walls. The ceiling shook as if the entire structure was on the brink of collapsing. "We need to buy ourselves some time," Gavin shouted as he fired the station's limited weapons at the incoming warship. "It's not much, but I can hold them off for a little while." Jackson's eyes darted across the station. His mind was racing. They didn't have enough weapons, and the enemy was much stronger. They could not win this fight with sheer firepower, but maybe, just maybe, there was another way. Turning to Reichs, who was still watching from the corner of the bay, Jackson had an idea. It wasn't perfect, but it was all they had. "Captain Reichs!" Jackson called out, his voice urgent. "I need your ship's energy weapons. Now. If we combine them with our shields, we might be able to turn the tide." Rix didn't reply immediately. He was calculating, analyzing the situation. Finally, his voice cut through the chaos. "You want me to trust you to handle my ship's systems? You've got a lot of nerve, human." "This isn't about trust," Jackson replied, his voice steady. "It's about survival. We're both in this together now. Help us, and we can both get out alive." For a long moment, Rix said nothing. Then he moved toward his ship. "Fine," he muttered. "You'll get your chance. But if you fail, I'll make it work," Jackson said, his tone unwavering. Rix entered the alien ship, and the crew waited in tense silence. The warship outside continued its relentless assault, its weapons battering against the station's shields. Then, just as the enemy ship prepared for another strike, Rix's ship powered up. A massive beam of energy shot out from the alien vessel, connecting with the enemy ship's shields. The impact was like thunder, shaking the station even further. For a moment, everything went silent. "Did it work?" Mia asked, her voice trembling as she watched the readouts. Jackson's heart raced. The enemy warship was flickering. Its shields were failing. The alien captain's energy beam had weakened it enough for them to strike back. "We've got a shot," Jackson said, a fire igniting in his chest. "Gavin, hit them with everything we've got. Let's finish this, Gavin." Didn't hesitate. He fired the station's weapons with all his strength, sending a barrage of blasts straight into the enemy ship's weakened shields. The enemy ship's hull buckled under the onslaught, and for a brief moment Jackson dared to believe they had a chance. But the enemy ship wasn't finished. It fired again, and this time, the blast tore through one of the station's external walls. The station shuddered violently as the hole in its hull expanded, sending sparks and debris flying. "Status?" Jackson shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Mia frantically typed at the console, her face pale. "We're losing power. The core's overheating." Jackson's mind raced. They were close, but it wasn't enough. The station wouldn't survive another blast like that. "We need to get everyone to the escape pods," Jackson ordered. "Now." But as they moved to evacuate, the enemy warship made its final move. Just as Jackson turned to head to the escape pods, a bright flash of light filled the bay. The enemy ship's final weapon fired straight at the heart of the station, and the world around them exploded in a flash of energy. The last thing Jackson saw before the explosion consumed everything was Captain Reichs, standing beside his ship, his expression unreadable. Jackson's eyes snapped open. He was no longer in the control room, no longer standing in the face of chaos. Instead, he was floating. His body felt weightless, and his ears rang with the deafening silence of space. It was cold. His heart raced. The explosion had torn through the station, and everything had gone dark in an instant. He could feel his body being pulled in every direction. The world seemed to spin, but something held him steady. For a moment, Jackson couldn't remember where he was. Then the memories flooded back. The station. The attack. The blast. They had all barely escaped. He had to find the others. "Jackson!" A voice snapped him out of his thoughts. He turned his head, his mind still foggy from the explosion. There, floating a few feet away, was Mia. Her face was pale, but she looked alive, and that was all that mattered. "Mia!" Jackson gasped, struggling to steady himself as he grabbed the edge of a nearby panel. "What happened? Is everyone okay?" "We made it to the escape pods," Mia said, her voice shaky but determined. "But the station, it's gone. We barely made it out." Jackson's heart sank. The station that had been their home, the place where they had fought so hard to build a reputation, was now nothing but wreckage floating in space. The explosion had wiped it out completely. There would be no salvaging it, no rebuilding it. It was over. Jackson looked around. The crew had made it into the escape pods, but there was no sign of Captain Reichs or his ship. The alien captain had helped them, but had he survived? Had his ship made it through the blast? "Mia," Jackson said, his voice low. "Where's Rix?" "I'm not sure," Mia replied, her voice tense. "We've been trying to reach him, but there's no response from his ship." Jackson's mind raced. They had depended on Rix's help, and now they were left in the dark. If the captain had perished, they would be left stranded with no way to communicate with the galaxy at large. But something told Jackson that Rix wasn't the type to go down without a fight. "We have to try again," Jackson said, determination setting in. "We need to make sure Reichs is all right." Mia nodded and began working on the console in front of her, her fingers moving rapidly across the keys. She was trying to patch into the communications network, trying to get a signal through to Reichs' ship. Jackson stood in silence, staring out into the void of space. The debris from the station floated past them, chunks of metal and twisted wreckage that had once been a hub of human activity. Now it was a graveyard. And somewhere out there, Captain Reichs' ship was either dead or damaged beyond repair. After what felt like an eternity, Mia's voice broke the silence. "I've got something!" Jackson turned to her, his heart leaping. "What is it?" "It's Reichs' ship!" Mia exclaimed. "It's alive!" "The ship's systems are still functional and the captain's alive." Jackson's relief was overwhelming. They weren't alone. Rix was out there and they still had a chance to make things right. "Get him on the comms!" Jackson ordered. Mia nodded and set to work, her fingers flying over the controls as she attempted to patch a communication link to the alien ship. Moments later, a crackling voice came through the speakers. "Human, Jackson Reeve?" Rix's voice was as steady as ever. "I'm still here." Jackson couldn't help but smile. He was relieved, but at the same time, there was a growing sense of respect for the alien captain. Rix hadn't abandoned them, even after the attack. He had stuck around, and now they were on equal ground. "Reichs," Jackson said, his voice firm. "We made it through. The station is gone, but we're alive." "You're alive," Reichs' response came slowly. "I didn't think I would be." That explosion was, he trailed off, his voice filled with something Jackson couldn't quite place. "I owe you more than you know, human. Your crew's actions saved my ship. Without your intervention, I would not be speaking to you now." Jackson felt a small sense of pride, but he didn't let it show. "It wasn't just me. My crew worked together. And you helped us too. We couldn't have made it without you." Rix paused before responding. "I've never thought highly of humans. I've seen your kind as nothing more than pests. But now I see that I was wrong. You are capable of more than I thought." Jackson's heart skipped a beat, the words he had been waiting to hear. Rix, the cold, calculating captain of the Sci-fi Starfleet, had finally acknowledged humanity's worth. "Thank you," Jackson said simply. "That means more than you know." There was a brief silence before Rix spoke again. "We have a long way to go before we can repair our ships and return to the galaxy. But I offer you this. I will remember your actions, Jackson Reeve. And when the time comes, I will ensure that your station, your people, are respected. I will not forget what you've done." Jackson's mind raced. This was a rare opportunity. Reichs' words carried weight. The Sci-fi Starfleet could open doors for humanity in ways that no one had ever imagined. But it would take time that they didn't have yet. "We'll be ready," Jackson replied, his voice filled with resolve. "When the time comes, we'll be ready." Rix's ship flickered on the screen, his silhouette now visible as he stood on the bridge of his vessel. The alien captain was strong, a leader of his people, but for the first time, Jackson felt that they were on the same level. They had both survived, and they had earned each other's respect. As the communication link ended, Jackson turned to Mia, Kara, and Gavin, who had gathered in the escape pod. They had all made it out alive, and now it was time to move forward. "All right, everyone," Jackson said, his voice steady. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us. The station is gone, but we're not. And now we've got an ally. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." The crew nodded, a renewed sense of purpose filling the air. They had lost their home, but they hadn't lost their will to fight. They were still here. And now, they had the respect of the galaxy's most powerful force. As Jackson looked out into the vastness of space, he knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured, not through force, but through ingenuity, determination, and the courage to stand alongside those who once thought them weak. And with that, Jackson Reeve and his crew prepared for the future. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way with newfound respect, trust, and strength.